Hello beautiful people, welcome back to another Flutter tutorial, and today we are going to be doing some boring stuff. We are going to be looking at Dart. Okay, so without any delay, let's get into it. So why does Flutter use Dart? Now Dart is a programming language, okay, and there are several programming languages out there that you can use for application development, but why does Flutter use Dart especially? Okay, so one of the core reasons is that it is optimized for UI development, okay, and basically Flutter is a UI framework, okay, so that is optimized for things like that. So that's one of the main reasons why it uses Dart. Now the second feature, which you probably have noticed, is that the hot reload feature, okay, this hot reload feature. Now this is what enables us to, anytime we type something and then we save, we see the change happen in real time within the emulator. So you notice you have your app and then you have like your app bar here, so for example, and then within your code, when you type in your app bar, so a little bit of Flutter in here, when you type in your app bar and then you say, let me just shorten this to background color, something like that, is equal to, let's say, colors.blue. No, the default is blue, so let's say black. Okay, when you do that, you notice, and you save, you notice that this changes to black. So if I can get black, and then this changes to black. So basically that is this hot reload feature helping us with that. Just like if you're familiar with web development, as soon as you save, you see your change reflect within the browser. So that's a good thing compared to native Android development. This can be a pain as you have to rebuild the entire application. So the hot reload feature, what it does is that this is the only thing that changed in the code, so it updates just that. It doesn't go through rebuilding the app to run it just to show a color change. Okay, and the final core thing is that it ships to multiple platforms. Okay, so that is why you can easily write your code and then you can ship it to mobile, web, or desktop. Okay, and for the purpose of this video, we are going to be looking at these core concepts. So we are going to be looking at variables and types, conditionals, and then we are going to look at loops. Okay, so let's clear this canvas and then let's begin with variables. Alright, so now that our canvas is clear, what is a variable? Okay, now I'm not going to be so technical about all of this. I believe that's not really the point of these tutorials, is to make this as simple as possible so that a 5-year-old can even understand. So in the simplest terms that I can explain a variable is just a box. Okay, so it's just a box somewhere in your RAM or memory that can hold a value for as long as your application is running. So for example, let's have this box over here, okay, and I call this, let's say, name. This box is called name, and I put a name like let's say John inside. Okay, this is my variable that holds the name John. For the period of my application, this box, okay, which is my variable called name, could have a different value like Sam if I decide to change it. Okay, that's basically what a variable is. It's just a container that can hold one value of a particular type, okay, for as long as the program runs, and can change. Okay, and this is at the core of most, and if not all, programming languages. Okay, you need to understand the concept of variables. So let's look at type and then we can marry them together. So when we talk about type, what do we mean by that? Now another lazy example, we in our homes we usually have containers that hold specific things. Okay, so let's say we have a container of some sort. There's a cover that holds sugar. This particular container has a type of what? Sugar. So sugar here is the type of this container? This simply means that this container is meant to hold only sugar. So you shouldn't be putting salt in here. That will be wrong. This is what we mean by types. And then types go with variables. So in Dart, if you want to declare a variable, okay, what you have to do is you have to specify what type of thing would my container hold. Okay, so let's assume I'm going to declare a variable called age that is going to hold a certain age. Then I know age is a number, okay, and we have different kinds of types. So before we go on to that example, let me actually specify some of the types that we have. So we have numbers, for example, and these numbers can be broken into ints, such as integers, or doubles. So doubles are just floating point values, okay, not doubles but double. So a double is just a floating point value. For example, something like 9.3. An integer is something like 2. It doesn't support floating point values, okay. That's something you should take note of. And the second one we can look at is strings, and the type here is just a string. So a string is just a series of characters. What do I mean by a character? A is a character, B is a character, C is a character, and so on. So if I have something like Sam as a name, this is a string, a series of characters. And one defining feature of a string is that we usually enclose them in double quotes. Okay, now in Dart we can either use double quotes or single quotes, but do not mix them up. So you can't do something like Sam, for example, and say double quote, single quote. This is wrong. This wouldn't work. So you either go with this or you go with that. Okay, and then the third option here is booleans. So in the Tippy tutorial, you notice I used a boolean, and the type here is a bool. A bool can take only two types, which is either two values, either true or false. It doesn't hold 1, 2, 3 or A, B, C, D. It's either just true or false. Okay, and then the last thing I'll be looking at here, okay, is going to be of type list, and the type is going to be list. So the way I explain list could be weird, but just to understand what we mean by that, a list, okay, a list is also a type of variable. Okay, try and follow along here. A list is also a type of variable, but this variable can hold more than one item. Okay, this variable can hold more than one item. So for example, remember at the beginning I said a variable is just any container that can hold a single value for the course of your program and could change. Okay, so let's say we have a class of 5 students and we want to maintain their scores. That will mean that I have to create a variable for each scores. So I would have to do something like, sorry about that, I would have to do something like this. I have to say score 1 is equal to maybe student got 20, score 2, maybe the student got 30, score 3, maybe the student got 50. Let's say for the sake of this, we have only 3 students. Notice I have to create 3 of these. If I had, what do you call it, a class of 100 students, I'll be creating 100 variables to store scores. Now, a list is a type of variable, okay? Now, when I say type, not what we have here. So let me phrase it this way. A list is a kind of variable. I hope that makes sense. That can hold more than one value, okay? So the way we declare a list is very simple. You give your list a name. So this time I'll say scores, okay? And I'll assign it, and then we open a square bracket like you saw in the Tippy calculator. And then we can put in our 20, our 30, and our 40 or 50. just like this. Okay, now I'll end the list for here because we're not dealing with a list right now. I just wanted to understand how a list would work. So now let's look at how we use these types with our variables. If I am to create, for example, a variable called age, okay, like I was saying earlier, I have to tell the PC, or I have to let that know that this variable, what type of thing is it going to hold? Is it going to be of type integer or a type double? In this case, I am declaring a variable called age, which is just a number. Nobody is 12.5 years old or 12.3 years old. Okay, so the way I'll do that is I would have to first specify the type, and then I'll specify the name of the variable. Then I would have to assign it a value. So the way I'll do that is I'll have to specify the type, the name, an assignment. Now I explain this, and a value. What do I mean by this? Alright, so I have to specify the type that this variable is going to hold. So what I'll simply do is, since age is just going to be a number, then the best choice there is going to be an int. What is this going to be called? Now, you want to make sure your variable names make sense. So since I'm declaring an age, then it's right that I call this age. Then assignment is just our equal to symbol. And then the value I want to give to this would be, let's say, 12. And then I have to end with a semicolon. This is like the full stop of that programming language. And this is basically what we mean by type. So what happens is that anytime I want to assign a value to age, later on, if I want to change the value of age, I don't have to specify the type because I have created it already. I can call age again, all right, and then assign maybe 20. But I cannot call age and say age is 21.3. This is not going to work because the type here is of type double. Okay, this is of type double. But I said age is what? An int. So that isn't going to work. That is why types are quite important. This helps you check yourself that you're not making a mistake. Okay, so this is what we mean by declaring your variable and specifying the type. So if you want to declare a variable, this is all you need to keep in mind: the type, the name, your assignment operator, and then the value. Now let me just make this clear also. Usually in programming it works this way: if I have int and I have age equal to 30, all that I am simply doing is take the value age and store it inside this container called age. So I think I should have said take the value 30, not age, and store it inside this container called age or variable. That is how assignment works. This is not equal to in terms of comparison. It doesn't work that way. So this thing is something you should take note of. If you're familiar with languages like Java, JavaScript, this should be a walk in the park for you. But if you're new to this is something you should keep in mind. Okay, so when we are making assignments, we are just storing the value of what? 30 inside age. Okay, and then we can use this age which contains 30 for anything we want to do. Okay, so in the same way, if I want to declare a floating point value, then I'll have to say double as the type, and then I would say let's say temperature, so temp for short, would be equal to let's say 30.7, and this would be accepted because a double type accepts decimal places, floating point values. Okay, very, very simple. Now let's move on to strings. Now strings are also some of the common things we'll be using a lot. Now, like I said, again, if you want to declare a variable of type string, then you specify string as the type. Now note that string is uppercase S, int is a lowercase s, so that is one deviation you should take note of. Then I want to call this name, and I want to assign a name to it. So note that I said a string is a series of characters enclosed in single or double quotes with respect to that. Okay, so I can say John, like so, or I could have said, for example, double quotes John. Either way, it's accepted, but you don't do something like single quote John, double quote. This is wrong. Okay, and that is how you simply declare a type like that. Okay, so working with strings, very simple. Also, when we move on to booleans, remember I said just takes what, true or false. So the type there is going to be bool, just like this. The name of that is going to be what? So let's say let's create something called is male, and then we assign true to it. So this is how you create variables that have the type of bool. Now there is a convention that we usually like to use, is by prefixing with this is, okay, which sort of makes it sound like a question. So is this thing a male, so we can either say it's either true or false. We cannot say it is yes. We can't say that it's wrong. It's just a true or a false. So I can either say false, and notice how we do not put that in quotes. True and false are keywords in Dart. Okay, so some keywords you need to keep in mind as follows. So something like abstract, as, okay, even a word like new, continue. There are a whole lot. You can check. There are a whole lot. You can check the Dart document, and you will get to know all the keywords. You cannot use these keywords as your variable names. Okay, you cannot use them. So we are going to be using true or false. These are keywords that we can work with, and we've already looked at list declaration, so I'm going to skip all of that. Now let me clear the canvas. Now that our canvas is cleared, let's look at conditionals. What do you mean by conditionals? Well, we use conditionals to check logic and then decide what to do next, okay, in simplest terms. So when you're running your application, you go from A to B to C to D to F, so on and so forth. What if when you get to B, you want to check for something? And depending on the outcome of that thing, if it is true, you want to do X, Y, and Z. But if it is false, you want to do Q, R, S, T. That is what we simply mean by conditionals. And the only one I'm going to look at is using the if and else statements. Okay. These two. And how does this work? Well, it's very simple. First, we just type in if, we open a bracket, and we specify a condition. And then after that, we will open our parentheses and then we close our parenthesis. Now, if this condition is true, then we would do something here. We would do something here. So, for example, let's say we have a variable called an integer type variable called age, and then we want this age to be 17. Okay, we've assigned this value to 17. Now, if we want to check and make sure that if this age is 18 or more, then what should we do? Or if this age is equal to 17, what should we do? Then what we can do is we can simply say if, and what should be our condition? We are checking if this age variable, okay, contains a value. Now, if you want to do comparison, we use two equal tos. Okay, so if this age value is equal to 17, okay, then what do I want to do? Now, if that is true, then I'd probably, let's say, print something. Okay, something like that. So if this condition turns out to be true, which is true because age is what, 17, right? Then we would do what is inside here. Now, what if this age wasn't 17? What if I was looking for a different value of, let's say, let me use a different color here, of let's say 18. Now, this condition turns out to be what? False. And so this wouldn't run. Okay, once the condition is false, this wouldn't run. Nothing will happen actually. Okay, now this is where the else part comes in. The else part comes in to run when the if part, the top part here, fails. Okay, when it fails to meet the condition. So for example, so you open and then you close like this. So what happens here is that if this condition is false, this doesn't run, but this part runs. Okay, if this is true, this runs, this part doesn't run. The two never run at the same time. If your condition is true, this runs. If your condition is false, this runs. That's just how it works. Okay, now there are cases where you want to check a value for multiple instances of something. So what you do over there is to simply do what? You have, let's say, you would say if you open, you have your condition 1. So this is your first condition you are checking. If this condition is true, you will do something. Now, if you want to check another condition, say condition 2, then you simply, now you can write this here or under. So you can simply bring in your else and then add another if. And then you have to check another condition in this one. So condition 2, you open your parenthesis and then you do what you want to do. If you have another check, you just keep repeating else, if, condition 3. There's supposed to be 3. And then you do what you want to do here. And then if you've checked condition 1, condition 2, condition 3, my mouth, condition 3, and nothing seems to be working, you need to include your final statement, which is going to be an else without the if. So all that we are saying is that if this turns out to be true, then this happens here and that's all. Case closed. If this is false but this turns out to be true, so if this turns out to be false somewhere and this turns out to be true, then this will run and then that's the end of the program. If this turns out to be false and this turns out to be true, then this runs and that's the end of the program. But if this is false, this is false, and this is false, then this would be the part that runs. So this last else only runs when all of these have failed. That is how it works. Okay, now I am explaining some of these things as simple as I can to also make it easier for you to understand when we are working on the functionality of the Tippy app. That's just the main idea. I'm not trying to be very technical here. Okay. And then the final part is going to be loops. So let's clear the canvas. So what do we mean by loops? Now, when we loop over something, we are simply iterating or going over that thing till we meet a certain condition. So think about the running track. I hope I can draw that properly. Something like this. Okay. You know, this is 400 meters, right? I hope I'm not making a mistake. So we can only go around this thing once, and we've gone what? 400 meters. Now, if we wanted to go 1,200 meters or 1,600 meters, do we have to lay out a track that is as long as 1,800 meters? No, we don't have to. We can simply loop over this track for as many times that we have to go around to meet this 1,800. So if, let's say, in an event, we have our running track and we know this is 400, and then we need to run for 800 meters. What do? We have our first loop, that's 400. We loop again, 800, and we are done. So we have 800 meters just by going out twice. Okay, that's the idea of looping, basic idea of loops. So what are the core loops in Dart? We have the for loop, we have the while loop, and we have the do while loop. Now let's take each one of these one by one. Okay, so let's look at the for loop on its own. Okay, so the syntax looks like this. We have the for keyword. Okay, then inside here we declare a variable separated by semicolon. We have our condition here separated by semicolon, and we have an incremental or decremental. And then we have our parentheses here, and we do some code. Okay, this is the syntax. So how does this actually work? Now let's do this. I would say for open here, then the convention is always an int, and we call this I, and we usually assign a value of 0 to it. So int starts at 0. Then the next thing is our condition. So what is our condition? Let's say for as long as our I is less than, let's say, 5, that is our condition. Now what is this incremental and decremental? I'll explain that as we go on, but basically we do this by saying that I plus plus. So if you remember the counter app, this simply means that I plus plus is the same as I is equal to I plus 1. Okay, so if I is 0, equal to I is also 0 plus 1. So 1 plus 0 is 1. And then we know this is still I, so I becomes 1. Okay, that's just the idea here. So if this is decremental, so decremental simply means I minus minus. Okay, but for now let me just leave it as this. I hope I am not confusing anybody. In case you are having any confusion or I've made things worse for you, just let me know in the comments. After you do this, we simply close this, and then we can open our parentheses here. And then let's say we print hello. Now let's go through this and see how this works. So all that we are simply saying is that we want to print this statement for as long as I is less than 5. That's all we are doing. We want to print this statement for as long as I is less than 5. So this is how it works. When we run the code, we start by creating this our I value. Okay, we create this I and we give it 0. So as a start, I is equal to 0, right? Is 0 less than 5? True, right? So we now come inside here and then we print hello. So the first iteration, we print our first hello. We have nothing under, so it will now go back and then do what? Increment I by 1. So now I becomes 1 after the first run. Okay, now it will go back and check. The value of I is now what? I is now what? 1. So is 1 less than 5? This is still true. So we'll come back here and then print another hello. So the second run, we are able to print another hello. Then we go back here, we increment I by 1, and I is now what? 2. So because 1 plus 1 is 2. So when we come back here, I is what? 2. Is 2 less than 5? True. We come back in here, we print hello. So the third run, we get another hello. We go back, increment I is now what? So I forgot to write 2, sorry. So we increment I is now 3. Is 3 less than 5? This is also true. So we print hello. So on the fourth run, we print hello. And then we do what? We increase I by 1, which becomes what? So I3 here now becomes what? 4. Is 4 less than 5? True. So we come back in here, we print hello. So for the fifth time, we print hello. And then we do what? We go back here and then we increment I by 1. So we come here, we pick our I that was 4 and then we increment it by what? 1, making 5. Now, is 5 less than 5? No, 5 is not less than 5. 5 is equal to 5. So now, since this condition is now false, we now exit out of the loop, and you can see we have done this what? 5 times. We could have written print hello, print hello, print hello 5 times, okay, just to get to this point. So this is how the for loop works. It's very convenient because it allows you to create all your checks in here. Okay, now let's look at the while loop. I know I'm blazing through this a little bit, but yeah, so let's clear the canvas. So let's look at the while loop. How does this work? Now the while loop mostly requires you to have something already created. Okay, so the while loop syntax looks like this. While you specify your condition, and then you do what you want to do when this condition is true. And then I didn't create enough space, so let me remove this. And then you increment or decrement depending on what you are doing. This is how the syntax of the while loop. So let's see how this actually works. So let's say I have an integer value of age which is equal to, let's say, 18. Okay, and let's say I have I want to do something. I want to welcome the user 5 times or 2 times if the user is 18. Okay, so what can I do? So while, what is my condition? So if age is equal, so remember, equal to 18, then I want to keep doing whatever So let's see how this works. So I'm going to create a variable integer of let's say counter, and I'm going to initialize it as 0. Okay, now this is one thing you can already notice. The while loop, I cannot create my variable inside here. I cannot. You just can't do that. So you have to create your variable outside. Then we would say while, okay, we open our parentheses, and then we can say as long as our counter is less than maybe 3, then I want to print hello to the user, and then the incremental part is where I would now say counter plus plus. So again, if we run this, it's very simple. We have our variable created here. So on the first run 1, is counter less than 3? So counter is 0. 0 is less than 3, right? So we simply say what is true. So we print our hello. Now we go ahead and increase counter by 1. So counter is now 1. So it's 1 less than 3. So in our second run, the condition is still true. So we print another hello. We increment counter by what? 1. So making counter now 2. Now on our third run, is 2 less than 3, which is true. We come in here and then we print our hello again, and then finally we increment counter by 1, making it 3. Is 3 less than 3? No. Condition is false. Case closed. Okay, this is how the while loop also works. Okay, now the final one we'll be looking at is the do while loop, and then we can have some code to demonstrate some of these things, and then we can call it a day. So let's look at the do while loop. How does this look like? The syntax of the do while loop starts with a do, parentheses close, and we have a while statement where we put our condition. Now I know this seems a bit weird, but it actually makes a lot of sense. So this is where we put in our code. So how do we actually use this? Now the main difference between the while loop and then the do while is that this, so the while loop checks the condition before executing, but the do while executes before checking. So use this, okay, use this if you want to at least run your code once. Okay, if you want to display something like you need somebody to enter the username and you want to keep asking them to enter their name until they have done it, or you are asking somebody to guess a number, you first have to display guess a number before you check whether they've guessed the number right. You don't want to check whether they've guessed the number right because I haven't even guessed the number. Okay, so this also, let's declare an integer of let's say counter again, and let's assign this as 0 for example, and then we can say do, and then let's say print hello, while, and then we can now take our counter. Oops. So we want to do this for as long as our counter is something. So for as long as our counter is let me get my eraser. So our condition here, I'm going to make it counter. So we want to do this while this is true. Okay, so if our counter is not equal to 0, then we want to do this. But you notice our counter is what? 0. Okay, so I've used something new here. We have operators, so we have equal to is to compare. This exclamation equal to means not equal to. So we have greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. Okay, these are most of your comparison operators that you will be using. Okay, now and then we have like for addition and subtraction, those kind of things. What are they even called? Algebra or something. We have our usual plus, minus, what again? Division, and then multiplication, which is asterisk, and then we have one called modulus, which is the percent operator. So the modulus just returns the remainder of a division. So if I say 2 modulo 2, the answer is going to be what? 0, because 2 divided by 2 is what? 1, remainder 0, and modulus just returns the remainder as your answer. Okay, so that's just by the way. So in this our example of the do while loop, we are saying that we want to do this while our counter is not equal to 0, but counter is 0. This would run only 1, so we'll get 1 hello and the code ends, because we are saying do, so it does this and it comes to check the condition, and the condition is false. Okay, the condition is false, so it doesn't run again. So do while loop would run at least once. Okay, whether your condition is true or false, it will run at least once. If it runs once and it checks and the condition is still true, it would go back and then do this, come back and check. It will keep doing that till it ends. Okay, so that ends it for this first part, and I hope I made things a little bit simpler. If confusing, please let me know in the comments. And this has been Happy Cat as usual. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share this video.